Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today for our first Brazil-Canada Mining Talks of the day, Legal Trends on Debt and Equity Financing in Brazil, hosted in partnership with Sescom Barrier. I'm Carolina Alberna, CEO of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your MC here today. I'm very excited for today's program, despite being our last day of the Brazil PDAC 2021. There's still a lot happening, so get comfortable as we start our program here. We'd like to thank our sponsor companies, our partners for supporting us, for making sure that we can actually bring this program to you today. And if you wanted to learn more about our sponsors and partners, please check the exhibit hall in the platform where you can find information and contact from all the companies. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker of the day, Joaquim Oliveira, Managing Partner at Sescom Barrier, to perform the opening remarks. Joaquim, welcome, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you very much, Carolina. Thank you for the opportunity. Well, good morning, everyone. It is an honor for us to participate in such an important event. And as managing partner of Sescom Barrier, I will make a very short opening just to tell a little bit about our view about the mining industry in Brazil and the future we have ahead of us. The mining industry has always played a very important role in the Brazilian economy and will continue to play. It's an industry that generates significant revenues and jobs directly and indirectly, and will continue to do so in the future. It's a very strong and resilient industry. It faced downturns several times throughout the years, but it was able to reinvent itself. We are seeing that right now. Brazilian legislation is evolving. Environmental concerns are becoming even more strong, and people are understanding how the industry can continue to work in several fronts. As a firm, we made substantial investments in the mining industry. When Marcelo Mendo and his team joined us in 2018, that was a big step for us as a firm. It was a big team joining us. Was the first time that we did something like that, especially considering that Marcelo joined us in Belo Horizonte. But it proved to be a very, very special decision for all of us, and it proved to be the correct one. Now we have our Toronto office with Frederico Marques that just joined us. And the short result of all this is that we are here today speaking and sponsoring one of the main events of the industry. And we are very honored to do that. I'd like to extend a special thanks to Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce. Thank you to Carolina to host us today. That's basically all I have to say. Today, we will discuss several aspects of the debt, equity, and M&A transactions in the mining industry in Brazil. There are many, many topics, very relevant ones. I also would like to thank all the speakers that we have with us today, people that have substantial experience in the industry, and I'm sure that they will share their knowledge and experience with all participants today. To say that Brazil and Canada has a historic relationship, particularly we as a firm have worked with Canada for several years, and we're still surprised by the opportunities that we have. And every day that we are now closest to the mining industry and to Canada, we've been talking to Fred Marques about all the opportunities and ways that we have to increase our relationship with Canada and Canadian players, and it's really surprising. So my special thanks again to everyone that is listening to us, and I hope you have a very productive day. And unfortunately, we could not be together. That's new to everyone. I think we need to reinvent ourselves and continue in home. And we hope that next year, with the vaccines come along and the things are getting better, we may see each other personally. So thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Joaquin. I hope that so too. I hope that we'll be able to host you all in Toronto a year from today. So our next panel discussion will be in Portuguese.
And I would like now to call forward for our next panel, Marcelo Pellegrino, Marcelo Endros, who will have Marcelo and Maurício Pellegrino, who will be the moderators. And I would like to call Yoshihiro Nemoto from the ANM, the regulatory agency, Ana Paula Calino, Paulo Azevedo, Isabel Carvalho, and Pedro Paulo Dias from BNDES Brazil. Thank you very much for joining us. I will now give the floor to Marcelo and Mauricio, our moderators. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcelo Mendo, and I'm very excited about this day, and especially feeling quite honored by the invitation by the Brazilian Canada Chamber of Commerce, brilliantly led by its CEO, Carolina Albernaz, who has done a splendid job and whom we had the pleasure of meeting and following up this last year. She was at the PDAC last year. I will ask Frederico Marques and Frederico Viana Rodrigues to please open their camera. I would like to introduce them to you because I would like to thank Carolina for her work, as I was saying, but I would also like to begin by stating that last year, on the invitation of the BCC and Frederico Marques, we had a mission here in our office where Frederico Viana Rodrigues and I and myself and our partner from the mining sector of Siscon, who together with Joaquim Oliveira invited us 2 years ago to be part of their office, to open and give continuity to the mining industry department. We had a very interesting part in the transactional area, together with Marcelo Pellegrino, who was our partner in Siscon, who will help me moderate this panel and who is in charge of the mining and environmental department. And Freddie with us last year after the PDAC, which we hope will be once again person-to-person, face-to-face presential event. We had the opportunity of being in Toronto, which we hope to repeat next year and join you physically there. Here, today, we'll have a first panel on the debt financing and collaterals in the Brazilian mining industry. In this first panel, we have guests of the highest level, and it's a pleasure to have Ana, who accepted our invitation. We will have Yoshihiro Nemoto, who will start speaking, Paulo Azevedo, who is on our mining team, and she's our counselor. She will be a speaker in this first part of our panel. And Yoshihiro will present the views of the National Mining Agency, the regulatory agency of Brazil. Then we'll have the presentation by Pedro Paulo Dias from BNDES Brazil. He is the marketing director, and he is an economics analyst who will give us a very clear idea of a major development bank in Brazil regarding the mining sector. And as Joaquim said, earlier, and he was, and I would like to thank him for his words on behalf of our team at the Six Combarrier. Are very happy to be part of this panel, and on our profile at Six Combarrier on the site, we have attached what we have prepared with a great deal of care from what we call our 2021 Brazil Mining Gas, which is a cooperation of all the team members, an idea to bring you landscape of our legislation in Brazil regarding the mining industry sector, opportunities and challenges. It's in our profile on the platform. And you can see here it in the PDAC. We have all these elements. Our site also supplies information, Brazil Mining Gas, and this document is being launched today. And as I said, it was created with a great deal of care. So without further ado, we have to listen to these brilliant speakers that we invited. And the idea is to give you the state of the art in terms of what is taking place in Brazil. We are going through a very innovative moment. In 2017, the government launched the revitalization program for Brazil. Several standards and legislation were enacted on the basis of this plan. One of the main effects was the creation of the ANM that replaced the old National Department of Mining. And this regulatory agency has a start to modernize the sector, to perfect the geological potential of Brazil. And I understand little of the territory that is underexploited, and a panel like this will show that access to investments, to collateral and warranties will be fundamental for us to be able to alter this Brazilian potential, make it grow, evolve, and we strongly believe in that. We will therefore discuss this here in this panel. I will give the floor to Mauricio, who will say hello to all of you. You have already, we will introduce Yoshihiro, and then we'll follow on with our panel. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy our discussion. At the end of this event, we will open the floor for questions and answers, and the panel will last 1 hour. Firstly, hello to everyone. I would like to once again thank Carolina and the BCCC for the organization of this event and for the opening this space to us so that we can today have a few discussions on topics that are extremely important. So when we talk about financing and having investments for the mining industry, which is an industry that has a life cycle and needs investment, needs strong investments, this is a fundamental topic for us to talk about, especially from the standpoint of the Brazilian industry growth that how much suffered from the pandemic, but showed or reaffirmed its value and its resilience. Just to put you in a perspective, the dynamics that we fought for the panel were to have 2 panelists, which will be Yoshihiro Nemoto. He is the superintendent of regulatory governance of the regulatory agency ANM, recently founded, which was a strong desire on the part of the mining sector. And then we'll have Pedro Paulo Dias, who is manager of BNDES, with this indication and this stance regarding financing. To enhance the debate, we have three specialists. We have a panelist with whom I work every day, Paula Azevedo, my colleague from the mining area, and who also works in the environment sector with Marcelo Siscombarrier. We went to the system and this whole team allowed us to develop with Siscombarrier all our potential. I will ask Paula to say a few words after Yoshihiro, and then we'll have Isabel Carvalho, who is a managing partner of the office in São Paulo, and our colleague in Siscombarrier, who is a manager of the finance sector, merging acquisitions, and I'll ask them to present themselves and present their speeches after Pedro, so we can follow this dynamic. Thank you very much to all of you who are here with us today and who are here to give their speech and share their ideas. And without further ado, considering that we risk being late, I will give the floor to you. Thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful day and a very fruitful one, that we can exchange ideas and develop Brazilian mining. And now I'll give the floor to Yoshihiro.
Thank you, Mauricio. It's a pleasure being here, being part of this panel. And I'm very glad to share the views of the mining agency. I'm going to put it in the context, this regulatory governance, and what is ANM doing now. So regulatory agencies, they have autonomy, technically speaking, and also economically speaking. This was regulated in 2009, and this is a difference, significant, which is the difference from the MPN that had a status of energy area, and now ANM has not this restricted. It has to follow the policies, national policies, and in this case, the Mining and Energy Ministry, and also the external organ, the Federal Republic, and also the Parliament. Why we have our general to have to pay to respect the agency, and also for all the society. All of these factors, they contribute not only, how to say, not only that this is a distinct solution, but this contributes also the RNM to act with more strictness in comparing to executive governance. And we have transparency in place that is very important, and this is one of the main points that the regulatory agencies follow and are compliant. They have been maturing and also following some practices and sharing experiences from almost 2 decades. The first regulatory agencies have also been exchanging experiences with international regulatory agencies, always with excellence, as the OECD. And it has also hired, together with OECD, to analyze the infrastructure of Brazil with its peers, together with Australia and also in Chile, that will be presented also in OECD in April. And this is very important to the transparency and the legal insurance, safety. And that's the importance of the regulatory agency, which has as main themes, which are the priorities from ANM, our first agenda then, that has already 1 year of existence. the idea is to make it very clear what will be the themes to be treated by this industry during this period, and also do a follow-up. An regulatory impact assessment also to be made. It has to be analyzed, the cause and effect, and analyze the possible sceneries to intervene, and to choose what optimizes the effects, positive effects, and also adverse effects. And also another aspect that's very important is the technical matrix, which this impact regulatory assessment, it has to be submitted necessarily to the participation of a social intervening with meetings, participation of meetings, with public audits, and public participations in an open dialogue with members such as of other public agencies and ministries and other agencies, also sister agencies that are from the environment and the public ministry. Everyone should participate so that we can certify. This is how we obtain subsidies in the phase of the proposal, or even in the proposal phase. So that this proposal has transparency, and the agents, they can know what they can expect, so they can improve, for example, this proposal, and to legitimate this regulatory proposal. And other factors that are worth mentioning: the reduction of the regulatory burden and the relation between the financing or the investments that contributes with the competitiveness and to attract new investments. AMNN has been focusing in two fronts. The first will be the reduction of the regulatory burden and standardizing of procedures. And in this sense, we can mention the electronic protocol, the system of electronic research that reduces significantly the cost of these. To pass through this first barrier of the entering of this mining industry, which is the licensing part, which used to take almost 2 years, and now we can do this in 34 days without the need of some technician to analyze. So this was one of the agreements entered that represented 1 billion reais, which is very significant in Brazilian standards. Another standard to mention will give back to the market many areas, actors of areas, and that we can attract more investments from 1 to 3 billion of reais in these areas that will be given back at the end of 2022, following our schedule. In this legal safety scenario, it is key also to reduce the burden, regulatory burden, and to give clear rules that sometimes they inhibit this economic leveraging. And very soon we're going to give some collaterals, financial collaterals. So it is very important to open Brazil to parameters adopted internationally, to value mineral assets, and also the resolution of collaterals that will bring to the discussion tables this legal safety, security for economical financing. This has been a request from the industry already for a long time ago. And now this will be able to be done and to attract the capital. We want to contribute for the dynamization and to potentialize the industry, the mining industry, for the equity investment, so can advance in debentures, as we see in other infrastructure sectors that is more used in foreign countries, so that we can use this with more security here. So we are also evaluating these collaterals, and we will bring this discussion for the industry. And to conclude, the objective of the agency is that the mining industry can access this financing uses in a more efficient way that in other sectors such as transportation, that we can attract this necessary volume of investments in these projects. So we are in a similar situation at this long-term investment. So projects have similarity with areas that I have mentioned. Then it's very common to leverage some investments in this way. So this is the scenario that is very interesting in terms of evolution for the industry, this possibility to attract and to make it more dynamic, this part of investments and to attract investments. And this will also cause a reduction of the capital costs. And therefore, to make this more dynamic and to change the face of the industry, the mining industry, not only to see the negative aspects, but also to generate wealth and resources and to bring benefits to the society in general. And I thanks for your attention, and I'm here available for the discussion. And I have a short time, so we have to do it. So I pass the floor to my colleagues now. Congratulations, Rocio. I think you were able in a very short time to our view and the structural changes that we're going through in Brazil and we're trying to implement. And I'm very happy with this information that you brought in this discussion, that is to evolve in our legislation, especially with some royalty and streaming agreements and contracts that is very used with very proprietary. And this happens in the whole world and in other industries in Brazil. And we surely needed this a lot, the creation of the mining agency, which is one of the last agencies to be created after the Constitution of 1988, many years later, that we were able to solve something that is very natural and that the private sector has been able to solve. And I quote your words, the agency is transforming today something obvious, that it's going to participate of a process and will clarify with this new rules points so important for us, and this will also be part of our debate. I'll pass the floor now to Paula. I ask Paula, following Yoshimiro's presentation, and as a legal lawyer, as we ourselves here in the office, how we see these resolutions, all of this process that is happening and this collateral agreement. So Paula, please give an idea how we're going through this process. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure being here and to be able to discuss this such relevant subject for the mining industry. I would like to contribute. I can't consider myself as a debater with Rochinura. I will ratify his words. For 15 years, we are testifying this evolution of the agency, and we are very satisfied to see this passes, the stages that the agency has been doing, especially in relating to this evolution that we see. If I could divide my 5 minutes of my talk, I would like to focus on what Yoshimiro put on the governance before and after, what we see in alterations, but also in the point of view of the positive aspects of this regulatory burden and the context for financing, and analyzing the previous scenery of governance, what we used to see, the lack of positivation of the subject matter. This lack of positivation is by stratifying the source of this. What did we have? Several different understandings. What type of mineral rights could we see as a collateral or as an assurance? From this point on, what we can see the discussions that causes very long processes and that cause insecurity in this industry. What we see now that makes us proud is the stages that we see annually happening from the legal point of view. 2017, as Marcelo pointed out, and Yoshiniro also said, and we talked about the subject of this new regulatory milestone since 2011 that became a reality in 2017. From that time on, we saw a very interesting point of view from 2017, the establishment of standards and the regulatory planning policies. As Yoshiniro highlighted, we have also a peer review point of view, what the international market adopts, so we can bring that to Brazil, into Brazil. And the second device that we saw is the competence of AMN and for better practices and a better monitoring of the market. And in 2018, as Marcelo highlighted, we had a revision of the regulatory, the mining code, and in relation to the matter, the express positivation in the disposition that we can give as a collateral, and delegating in Article 44 the resolution or the indication of hypothesis that these mining rights could be given as a collateral. And in 2019, these two laws, decree laws, very representatives for Brazil, as well as the new law from the agencies that interest for the regulatory stocks involving all the regulatory agencies, and additionally the law of freedom, economic freedom, was then consolidated within the scope of the agency in 2020, when we have the regulatory agency, which it lists the demands that it must review and review all its regulatory procedures, and also seeing that this is done in a faster way, which is an indication of some acts and decisions that will be then submitted. Of this scaling and this continuation, what we seen of a more opportunity for investment is in the second perspective, a little more about the matter, what we observe, the minute that is still, the minutes that is still in review, but with some discussions that we are still finalizing. We observe some gains in these minutes. The old problem that we had before the governments, the absence of positivation. The minutes brings us this hope in this new procedure to be outlined in a way that this reduces bureaucracy and speeds the process. And also discussion on mining rights, what can be given in as a guarantee, the actions by those that are being regulated, and also by the financing institutions. And concluding there my presentation, what are the results that are expected? And if we can list 4 expected results from this positivation of procedures: previsibility, pacification of an understanding, being able to do your provision and expectation as the agency asks for the resolution in the time frame of 20 days. Today, we have a direction about when we talk about deadlines. What is, when our clients ask, what is a deadline for these agreements to be entered? And concluding, what we expect is to be attract investments to Brazil. I would like to thank Marcelo, and thanks for your attention. Excellent, Paula. I think that you were able in a very short time to resume what Yoshihiro said and what we are discussing here. Here we are in a very important moment in Brazil, and that and all this regulatory package and all this collateral and what this will bring to us. I don't know if Mauricio or Fred or Marques or Fred Viana, if they want to make any additional comments so that you can pass to how the financing sector through investment banks, like through BNDES, by the outcome by Pedro. It's very important for us to have this point of view. I think this news that Yoshihiro brought to us, this evolution that we see that is happening, that we are exactly arriving to this normalization condition. And I think this is very important for us, that we see the need for investments and the productivity for Brazil. So Fred or Mauricio, do you want to make any additional comments?
Marcelo, se você me permite, eu gostaria sim.
Yes, I would like to add a comment, and I agree.
É realmente uma excelente notícia para o setor.
For the excellent news for the industry, and I would like to make
talvez sugestões
for this debate,
para enriquecer pouco mais esse debate. Sobre a resolução de garantias,
on the resolution of guarantees that were mentioned,
provavelmente vamos estar incluindo essa questão
probably we have to deal with this issue of the royalties. This is extremely important for the sector. There is no way for you to do a kind of financing or funding without having the guarantees and without giving the guarantees that the investors need. So this resolution is putting Brazil in the forefront and in equality with countries that already use these kinds of financing. That could also be a type of revenue for us. I would like to mention this to Yoshihiro because it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to have the royalties contract and have the registration at the notary's office for the bond. That is a very strong evolution to the sector, and this is going to help us bring this kind of capital inside Brazil for the exploration, for projects and development. So I would like to congratulate the agency. We have had some internal discussions, and I am at your disposal to continue these discussions and bring a little bit of the international experience on this topic. Just to wrap up, I have a second point about the reserve resources. This is something very old. It's a very old concept. I remember I was at an event with Marcelo Mendo, our dear José Mendo, in Belo Horizonte 10 years ago, and we we're highlighting already the importance of this. This is certainly going to be very well received by the sector, and I think that it's about time. Since this resolution is about to be approved, it's about time for us to deepen the debate with CVM and B3, so that we can also, in the market of capitals, level this type of information. Today, when we look at the companies that are listed in the Brazilian stock market, the disclosure of technical information follows different patterns. So let's take a look at the two current examples. The BDR of Aura. When you look at the BDR of Aura, you can see that it's very difficult to find the information in the documentation. And the second aspect is, when you're able to find it, the information of Aura follows the NI 43 for here from Canada. When we look at other companies, they follow a technical report that was written 4 or 5 years ago. They have an independent certification every 10 years. And inside in I-43-101, we have this disposition saying that the certification can be done every 10 years. Here in the Toronto stock market, when Nexa came here to the stock market, they did an I-43-101 for each one of their projects. And this whole discussion of resources and reserves levels the technical information and gives to the investors conditions to evaluate and price resources and reserves. When we look at the case of CSN, in their prospect, they do not include, they could be including the resources, but they do not do so. So we need to have not only the regulator dealing with this topic within mining, but we also should bring to the debate with CVN and B3 so that they have a better reach of this background work that mining is carrying out in Brazil today. So these are my two brief comments. Thank you very much.
Pequenos mais importantes, né?
Frederico, let's hear from you.
É tão importante isso, né?
I think I have a single, very brief point, especially when it comes to guarantees and the regulatory advancement. I think that I could link Fred's comments with Pedro's speech, which is the development of the internal market. We have here in Brazil a development of the financing lines. And Yoshihiro mentioned a very important point, which may be a topic for another presentation, which are the incentivized debentures. The mining projects as priority projects, as well as the energy projects that were so important and are still so important for infrastructure. The mining projects are very important to Brazil, and I think the inclusion of the mining projects as a priority project and the incentivized debentures are going to be a good incentive for an investment. Maurício, I am looking forward to hearing from Pedro. So I'm going to pass the floor to you very briefly, Maurício. I'm looking forward as well. I'm looking forward to listen to Ana Paula and Isabel as well. So Pedro, the floor is yours, please. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation by BCCC and SESCON. Thank you for the invitation to share with you my insights. I would like to start my speech highlighting this importance that everyone mentioned of building a shared agenda. Yoshihiro mentioned promoting more interaction with the market agents and with other bodies that take part in the sector. And this is fundamental for us to have transparency, safety for the investor, for the companies, and for us to be able to find joint solutions. I think this is the tone that is going to make us advance towards the goals that were defined in the program Mining and Development that was launched by our ministry last year. This sharing, and I would say the continuity, as Paula said, that dates back from 2017 in the advancement and the degree of background information that we have in the sector. I think this is paramount to bring what the investors need to advance in the funding policies. I would like to highlight that first, and I would like to congratulate the agency and the Secretariat of Geology and Mining for fulfilling this important agenda for the sector. So having said that, I would like to remind you of a testimonial that I heard on Tuesday at PDAC from an investing company mentioning the facility, how easy it is to obtain orientation from the agency to follow the step-by-step to make the project regular. It was very good to hear that, and it shows that we are in fact being able to achieve what we intend to do, which is improving our business environment. So both the agency and the government secretariat are on the right path, reinforcing those steps so that we can advance with the mining in Brazil. So about financing properly, we know that the mining projects have regulatory issues with the agency, as we mentioned here, the environmental damage, the area regulation, especially when we are talking about foreign companies, mineral resources that are going to be explored by foreign companies that demand a specific analysis. We have another set of risks that must be assessed. So I would highlight firstly the geological risk, which is specific for mining, and depending on the location and the type of the mineral, the type of the ore, and the type of funding necessary, it influences the other risks as well. So it's going to influence the social environmental risk, the location where the mining is going to happen, and also the market risk. So as Fred said, the technical information in the mining project and the look of the investor to a certain mine are the key factors for us to understand the market that is involved. And lastly, the credit risk. This is all going to influence the credit risk that depends on the stage of maturity of the company and the cash generation capacity. BNS has accumulated an important expertise in the funding of big projects. So the understanding of all of those risks and the analysis of all of those steps have based our work throughout time in this sector. So we are the biggest financer of mining in Brazil. In the last analysis that we had with data from 2002, BNDES funded over 25 million reais for mining, supporting investments of about 90 billion. With this experience, I would highlight the competence acquired by our team regarding the regulatory analysis of the projects. As a public development bank, this is a competence that our team has developed every day, and our team is very skilled to see which are the regulatory details that need to be worked on for each project, so there's no problem. And the impacts of the enterprise, economic, environmental, and community impacts. So in these fundings for mining, I think it is worth highlighting that BNDES has already funded over 150 million reais just for social work in the surrounding communities of these mining projects. This is a big pride for us because it is aligned with the ESG agenda that the companies need to adopt. So in our experience, we have carried out many structured financing we count on the use of many types of guarantees for the mining specifically. We also have the mining rights, as Paula said. We ended up having these mining rights being considered a guarantee that was less secure and that had less value. So it's fundamental to have the specification of the understanding so that the mining rights are taken into account. Yoshihiro also mentioned the guarantees that are used for the infrastructure projects. For the mining project, it's a little bit different. And we have to bear in mind that there are different rights. Our colleagues from the panel are going to be able to mention in detail each one of the instruments. A success case here that is very interesting when we mention the advancement of the mining strategies in Brazil was the project of Maracás, where we could see the structuring of a project financed by 3 national banks that could grant the guarantee, and BNDES entered that funding as well with the necessary deadline for this enterprise. So, in this landscape, how do we see the current moment? In terms of regulation, we have seen a strengthening of the paths to follow. In terms of the market, I think we are at an excellent time because this dynamism and this recovery that was very strong of the market and that is portrayed by the increase of the prices has lots of potential so that the financiers can use their strategies and advance in their capacity of risk assessment in these projects. So we have a very strong baseline. The maintenance of the growth rates in China have also influenced the market. And I think this is an opportunity for the investors based on the regulatory framework to advance and analyze their strategies. And this is done by sharing. We believe that the best way for this to happen is to share experiences, share track records, share risks of the funding. We see that this is a win-win model in the mining market because of all of the risks that we mentioned here. It is much more comfortable, I would say, for any investor to share all of those risks with other financing agents, each one of them doing their own procedures and exchanging possible improvements for the project. And we see this sharing in the market. There are many unions of banks sharing risks. And there's also a way for you to do the sharing via the funds. So we see the work of the financiers in this market sharing their portfolio. In this sense, we have launched an initiative of capital fund for mining exploration in PDAC 2020, so that we could face the pandemic. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we couldn't conclude this agenda, but in 2021, we plan to conclude our scope. And to wrap up here, fulfilling the time that I have, I would like to talk about the type of investment that BNDES has available for these kinds of projects. I would like to highlight once again that most of the cases, if not in all the cases, we can provide a deadline that matches the life cycle of the project. We can work with a deadline of up to 20 years. This allows us to have a financial modeling that could match the deadline for the financing. And then I would also like to mention the work of the BNDES and debentures. We also work on writing debentures for infrastructure and for the sustainable projects that demonstrate an advancement in ESG indicators. And we have also worked in the development of new projects.
And we have those credits that are linked to ESG credits. And once again, we make ourselves available to share our experiences, if you so desire, with the idea of sharing risk in this sector, which is something very important. Thank you. Thank you very much, Pedro. Actually, it's very important that we have this idea from investment banks, from BNDES, so that we can go forward. I'd like Isabel now to give us her presentation. Hello, thank you, Mauricio. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Cisco Barrier, that is our partner for so many projects, to be part of this event today and share this panel with these brilliant speakers. I'm learning a great deal here, and it's a pleasure to be here and to be in this panel. And I'd like to also thank the BCC. Before speaking about the financing by foreign investors as a backdrop, it is important to say that we have seen in the last 2 to 3 years a growing interest on the part of investors, generally speaking, foreign investors. Looking at Brazil, we see a record number of IPOs in Brazilian companies, and we know that these IPOs are funded by foreign investors, and the Brazilian market does not as yet has a culture to invest in the stock exchange, and also funded by direct investments. We see a number of M&A operations and credits that are granted. So we see a positive perception on the economic side and on the political side. We, of course, are going through a crisis because of the pandemic, but from the investment standpoint, we see a growing interest, which is very positive. Moving on to foreign investment in this sector, I'd like to state a few things beforehand. Actually, investors understand that these are long-term projects that require, in order to have a mine in full production, investors know that it takes a while. They know that financing will take a little longer, but that also means more strict criteria during the life of this investment. I was happy to see BNDES saying that it's doing all the financing, is granting loans for covering 20 years, because we see a broader term of 10 to 15 years as a usual term for this kind of financing. Investors, however, look first if the country has a regulatory and legal system that is stable. This is one of the primary considerations when contemplating a project. And we have seen the progresses that we've had with the founding of the regulatory agency and all the security that it brought. This was paramount for foreign investors, and this is extremely important. Foreign investors will look at the project, will look at the cash flow, will normally expect participation on the part of the sponsor or the equity of around 30 to 40%, and the debt, the 60 to 70%, that will be funded by him or her, the investor, will rely on the participation of local banks. BNDES would, of course, be a very significant choice in this package. And to mitigate risks, the investors will insert in this financing package some events or targets that will have to be achieved, and a very strict timeline of deliveries. There is also the feasibility study before one thinks of any kind of development or project, or to bring in any investor to obtain some funding. We must think about the feasibility study so that the project is really viable, so that is saleable, so that any foreign bank can finance it. And there is no standard model for that. Essentially, this feasibility study will include a reserves report, a financial model, an analysis on the environmental impact, because the environmental impact and environmental issues are crucial nowadays. What are the planned investments? What are the licenses that a project must have? So you need technical, financial, legal counselors to show this project to the banks, who that will also be consultants in this process. So this is a very important step. And abroad, it is quite common for companies to obtain financing to prepare this feasibility study, because this is very expensive, requires a great deal of technical expertise, and companies must bear it in mind. And of course, the cash flow of the project, because banks will look at the cash flow. They will see when the project will be on its feet, how much it will produce, when it will deliver, so that it can rig up the, let's say, the puzzle with the and create the funding contract. After that, we look at the loan agreements that will be under foreign law, that will include a number of statements and covenants and obligations to do, such as the upkeep of the licenses, and to build the facilities, the payment of dividends, and obligations not to do and obligations to do things, let's say, and the financial metrics. All this is very important. And together with this package, we'll have the collateral package. Shihiro mentioned the guarantees. This regulatory security is extremely important, because no bank will give a loan if there is no collateral. They will look at the collateral. What are the guarantees, the assurance the project can make in Brazil, that are feasible in Brazil? And my partner in Siscom, Ana Paula, will say what is possible here, because foreign investors will ask, can you have assured the license, the concession grant, the cash flow? What can you have? And this is a very important discussion that is needed for the funding. And we have also the funding models, as Marcus said. There are many abroad. We have the streaming agreements and the royalty agreements. The streaming agreements are more recent. They started around 2004 abroad, and they consist in the payment of a high amount for the right to ensure a substantial part of the production below market price, normally below cost, at the cost price or under the market price. This helps to finance the construction of the mine. Royalties are quite common as well. They are based on some sort of production of minerals and are used as leverage for finance. They can be based on the production unit, on the value, or also sometimes they are based on the profitability of the endeavor. It can be net income or other forms, but royalties agreements are used abroad a great deal as well to ensure financing for projects. I believe I have within my allotted time, and I'm here available if you have any questions afterwards. And I give the floor to Ana Paula. Thank you, Mauricio. I think I will start speaking directly. So first, I'd like to greet you all. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. And I would like to thank Pedro, Ana Paula, and all the others, because they had brilliant items raised for us when we talk about negotiations and talk about financing for the mining industry. There are several challenges. Nothing is very easy, but nothing that we cannot talk about and that lawyers are not used to talking about and addressing in the documents for a project. This increase in available areas that Yoshihiro mentioned is an excellent news. It will generate 3 billion. So we are ready for new financing and new collaterals and guarantees. Just a recap on what Ana Paula said on guarantees and collateral. This is being well accepted by the market and talks about the predictability and also the effectiveness and affirmation of this as something that we talk about with any funding body. It's a little harder to understand abroad, to understand how Brazil works, but this legal security is important, and so it's a fruitful discussion that always comes up. Pedro talked about the guarantee package, and I would like to talk about, in addition to guarantees on mineral rights, these are not restricted to mineral rights only. As sometimes you have the creditor assessing the mining endeavor and calculating that this will not be enough. It's a long-term venture, 10, 15, 20 years. Pedro mentioned the BNDES right now. So it's important for us to remember that concerns and discussions are not restricted to mining rights. We have other terms and other possibilities. We will talk about the shares and the liens on the quotas shares, the mineral itself, and real estate, and often corporate collateral, some kind of shareholder guarantee. Everything has to be taken into consideration in the project because they will exist in all jurisdictions. I've never worked on financing that will take into account only one country. We have to ensure this throughout several jurisdictions, Brazil, Germany, the rest of Europe, other countries. So we have to negotiate these, and we have also other concerns. Creditors need these guarantees already all wrapped up before they close any financing deal, so that the company will receive the money when expected. So this falls within the framework of our responsibility when we talk about financing. Another thing that we have seen a great deal, in addition to streaming, is the cash sweep mechanism. And it's always important to bear those in mind, because this will have to be negotiated. And we also talked about risk sharing. Often creditors do not want to get in alone on a venture, so you'll need a number of documents related to that, which will be an agreement among creditors that will state how they will operate during the financing of the business and how they will react in case of a default. I've just received a message here that it's time for me to wrap up. So I'll leave a few minutes for questions and answers. And I'm here if you wish to ask any questions. My email is available. Feel free to ask me. It was a pleasure.
Ana,
thank you very much, Ana. Thank you to all of you. I'd like to congratulate our speakers because we were able to keep on schedule and give to everyone in the audience a clear idea of the challenges faced. And when Yoshihiro said how he saw the royalty and streaming agreements through an analysis that can be used in the package of guarantees for the markets. And I will steal 5 minutes from the final presentation because we were quite enthused with his comments. So I would like to ask a challenging question, and Fred Viana, who will moderate the next panel, I will give him the floor, but I'm also stealing a minute from him. So I have 6 minutes to use.
and
they're mine to use now. So, Anna, since you summarized so well the situation, I would like to ask you a brief question. And if any of you wants to add a question, I think it's an important question. And something really caught my eye. What is the main challenge here? When you spoke, what is the main challenge for creditors and what are the challenges with guarantees? So could you each say which? I would say there are 3 items for this. We must understand the specificities of each country, what you have to build these collaterals and guarantees, the lack of standardization, because you need to write this in different jurisdictions and notary offices, and predictability. I think this is the greatest challenge of all. This is the question that we most often hear on the part of creditors, the loaners, because they are quite concerned about what they can build, what they can create in terms of guarantees, when they what assurance they get, and they want to have predictability in terms of discussion. And this is not easy in our country, as well as in others, actually. So I would say these are the 3 pillars in terms of challenges. Thank you very much. And going back now, Isabel. I think it's quite cool what you said. So what you say are the challenges? I think it's a challenge for foreign investors who are concerned with ESG. Pedro mentioned it. This is a concern in the BNDES. It is quite a huge concern abroad. It started with several banks saying they would not invest in the companies that are not sustainable. And we see how this concern about ESG and corruption, taking into consideration the recent cases in Brazil, the environmental issue. We have seen the recent cases, not that this does not happen in other countries, but looking at Brazil, they are very worried about that. And this is a part of the due diligence. It must be part of the feasibility study. It will be wrapped in the considerations in the loaning agreement, and it will be carefully perused by the banks. Banks will look at a number of questions, well-detailed questions, and I see this as a challenge, and companies must be prepared to meet this challenge at the level that banks require. It's not just engagement frontally speaking. You need effective governance, you need effective engagement. They really check whether you are committed or not. Excellent. What we can see in this PDAC, and this is coming up very strong in our panel. Pedro, I would like your comments. Thank you very much once again. I would like to highlight reliability and technical parameters such as standardization and how all this is relevant when you have to decide to take in or not a project. And I would highlight the development of financing institutions as well, that they have a practice record contemplating projects that are still in development. There are few cases of funding that require this sharing of experience and track record. And I would also like to make it clear here that in the case of a Lamsócio project, we have 3 commercial banks that granted collateral for BNDES to be part of the project. BNDES does not have experience in project financing in mining, in the mining industry. This is why we're talking about what we are doing and how banking institutions and other financing institutions are acting on this. Thank you very much. I'm very happy with this project from Lavde. This was an excellent project. And I think it's a fantastic project by Brazil, and we have to celebrate it, and several other fantastic projects. So thank you very much. It was quite interesting. I'll ask Mauricio and Paula. I will not give them the floor. I'll now give the floor first to Yoshihiro, who opened up this panel, and whom I'd like to thank once again for his participation and support, and for this fight in the change of this mindset. We are helping the mining industry to achieve success. I'd like to give you the floor to wrap up our panel. Thank you. Our main challenge is to deal with all these expectations, address them, or the standardization. This predictability is everything we have been investing in, and that is now bringing results, and that we are in which we are working to implement new electronic systems. The focus of regulation must not be surveilling documents. We used to that. We must use the means given by companies, but yes, oversee technology, oversee the results, and we must optimize our resources to do our work. Everything in the end contributes to the whole for the characteristics of the future of the country that is trying to reinvent itself in the last few years. We have invested a great deal in governance. The experience of the past have been taken into account, have taught us a lot, and Brazil is working on debureaucratizing itself. We want to be more modern and make the country more competitive. So this reduction of bureaucracy and incentives are here to help the country be competitive. Once again, thank you for the events. Thank you very much, Yoshihiro. On behalf of my colleagues at Syscom, I'd like to thank you for your dedication and efforts to bring in all these changes. We rely on you. We need you in Brazil, so please help us here. Do not set us aside. For us operators, we need you. So thank you very much. This is essential for your work. Paulo, you will speak because we are here available for everyone. So please get in touch with us through our site. I hope you like our mining rent, which is our contribution to the sector. Pellegrino, would you like to say a few brief last words and then give the floor to Frederico, because we have a very interesting panel on investments, and within the framework of this Friendship Brazil and Canada, we'll have a part of the panel in English as well as we had it in Portuguese. So thank you very much for your presence all. Well, I will now call Frederico. I'd like to say a few brief words. We must highlight predictability, dynamization, sharing of risk, legal security, and sharing of investments with SEO companies. So this is the main frame of what we heard here. I'd like to thank you all for your participation. Frederico, you have the floor, so that we can give continuity to this work. Thank you very much, Mauricio. Thank you, Marcelo. I would like to congratulate our speakers, and I will move to...
Good morning and good afternoon to our Brazilian attendees as well. I'd like to thank you, BCCC, for giving us the opportunity to present this discussion on public and private equity investments in the mining industry. There are some insights in our mining guide that caught my attention in relation to the subjects we are going to address today. According to the World Mining Data 2020, Brazil is the only Latin American country to rank within the top 10 large producers of iron, ferrous and non-ferrous metals, precious metals, and industrial minerals. Brazil is one of the most investor-friendly emerging markets in the world. Generally, local and foreign investors are treated equally under Brazilian law. Brazilian mining projects find in this scenario some good opportunities to raise capital. We have already discussed debt finance in the first panel. Let's talk a little bit about equity funding now. We'll have the view from a mining company perspective, Ana Cabral Gardner, who is co-chairman and chief strategy officer at Sigma Lithium Resources. From an investor perspective, Mauro Barros is partner and CEO at Or Investments that manages a private equity fund focused on mining projects. I think that maybe it's the first private equity fund with this very special focus. From an investment bank perspective, we will have Daniel Renner, who is XP partner and head of mining industry coverage at XP Investments, and Vitor Saraiva, who is also XP partner and head of equity capital markets at XP Investments. And finally, we have discussions from Gary Litwood, who is partner at McCarthy & Tetrow, focused on public and private equity and debt finance in the mining industry. And Marina Prado, who is our partner at Sescom Barrier, focused on M&A involving mining projects. I will invite now Julia Lobo, who is our partner at Sescom Barrier, and she is in charge of equity capital markets. Julia, let's start this discussion. I think that it will be great and very interesting. We have the opportunity to have some cases on what we have been discussing in general on a perspective of course, the BNDES and the agents. Let's hear a little bit about the mining company, the investment bank, and the investor perspective. Julia.
Hi, Fred. Thanks so much. I think we are going to have an outstanding panel today. We have the most prominent figures here to assist us in this wonderful discussion. So, as you mentioned, we have here Ana Cabral Gardner from Sigma. I would like to thank you again, Ana, for sharing your time with us and in your experience. And Sigma has recently obtaining funds in the TSX, and it is a successful case. So, Ana, could you share with us a little bit of the experience that you had, the main highlights and challenges the Sigma has faced?
Absolutely. Let me just take it out of mute. Absolutely. We just completed a $42 million private placement in a TSX. The transaction closed on February 10th, and the transaction was extremely successful. I mean, this transaction was upsized 40% from the original 30 million Canadian dollars we planned to raise. But more importantly, we were also able to raise the price range and priced outside of the range on the upper end, meaning above price range at we raised it by 10%, right? So we went from $4 to $4.40. So the transaction was an enormous success from both the size, but also the price. And that happened because we were able to build a book of orders that was massively oversubscribed. I mean, sources close to the deal have sort of unofficially said how oversubscribed the deal was, but it was of a sizable magnitude of 9 to 10 times. And we believe that success is due in great part because the company has been executing diligently over its life as a publicly traded company, which started in May 2018. In other words, we have been under-promising and over-delivering in execution in many counts, number one. But then two, we were fortunate to be at a very favorable moment from a market's perspective. And Daniel Henner here, he's the expert. We counted on his guidance initially on this transaction. So on which teams? I mean, essentially, the company has been at the very center of two key teams that are the focus of investors' attention now. One, ESG. We have built Sigma on an ESG-centric strategy. And then two, battery materials. I mean, Sigma Lithium supplies lithium products. Together with Mitsui & Co. of Japan, we supply lithium material products, meaning lithium chemicals, to cathode customers worldwide. So these two teams have been the focus of significant investor attention recently. And all of these three elements, I mean, battery materials, teamed, ESG centrism, and track record of consistent delivery for now over 2 years, going on to the third year as a publicly traded company, have indeed contributed to that success in the capital markets.
Yes, it's very interesting, Julia. But what I would like to hear a little bit, it's how an investor can add value in some companies that are in the early stage. And I don't know, I think that Mauro Barros can add some question relation to it.
Sorry, guys, I was on mute. Thank you for, for the introduction, guys. It's a pleasure for investments to be here. Well, our investment, as Federico mentioned, is maybe the first private equity firm focused on mining in Brazil. We were formed by Brazilians, we founded, and it's a firm managed by Brazilians. We started our the formation of the firm back in 2019, and in 2020 we made the first closing. Now we have about $50 million under management, and the total size of the fund might reach $80 million. And going to the question that Federico made, the idea of our investment is specifically to address this kind of challenge, to deliver capital, management, and expertise to early stage projects. Brazil, as several times was said before in PDAB, it's a mining country, it's a natural resources country, but it's a country that it's predominantly, that is majorly concentrated on iron ore, ferrous metals, that is run by major companies, and I don't need to say the name of them. And then we have junior mining companies that mostly raise money abroad in Canada, Australia, London. And then we see this lack of capital for early stage projects, especially for projects that are under the radar of the international market, that don't really have extensive diamond drilling or resources certificate under 43101 or JORC compliant. And there is this huge areas in Brazil with a lot of potential that simply is under the radar of the market and of the financial market, and also under the radar of foreign companies. In view of that, we decided to build up the firm made up from mining guys. I like to say that we are mining guys that came to the financial market and not the opposite. We have a long track record on mining, developing early stage projects to feasibility, construction, operation. We did it a lot of times in the past. Of course, I'm the youngest of the founding partners, so all the other ones, they have gray hair or no hair also. I'm speaking with the expertise of the other guys here, and how we actually create value is we use all this knowledge that we built over the years to select high potential projects, greenfield projects, take the risk for greenfield and exploration. And we know that most of the times, statistically, early stage exploration is not successful. So we take the risk. We make partnership with the current owners of the assets, and then we make technically exceptional work on exploration, regulatory, legal, finance, of course, ESG. And we plan to take the assets from early stage until 43-101 compliant resources and reserves reports or preliminary economic assessment stage, and then go for an exit. And then when we say exit, we might be talking about IPO, and we might be talking about M&A. Of course, this changes a lot on the market conditions, but those are the main venues for exit for our investments. So we might be talking about IPO in Toronto, in London, in Sydney. We hope in São Paulo too, or M&A with other mining companies that are already here in Brazil, or that are looking to have a foothold to build up, to build the presence of the company here in Brazil. So that's what we do. We have been doing this as executives in the last 30 years or so, and now we are doing it with some fortunate investors that decided to believe on us.
Hi, Mauro. Thanks. This is really nice, especially because we have, as you mentioned, a private equity fund focus on mining. That's something really different and in special. Yeah, especially here, as we are located in Minas Gerais, the mining state of Brazil. So prior to Ana has shared with us, and I think we have here, as per her experience, the type of investors. I found it really interesting, the type of investors that they had the opportunity to access when sourcing funds on the TSX. Ana, could you share with us a little bit about the investors and the requirements that you had to comply with, as well as everybody wants to know costs. What led you to do this funding in the TSX and not in other markets or by means of other types of financing?
Well, what we liked about the TSX, its flexibility, and we were talking about that pre-call. Essentially, the TSX is a global platform, and it brings what we call credibility, and it brings flexibility. What do I mean by that? Credibility stems from the fact that there are basically two exchanges in the world that have the infrastructure to validate technical reports and validate the eligibility and the criteria of elaboration, the high technical criteria of elaboration of technical reports and technical information produced by a company. Those two exchanges are the TSX and the ASX. The TSX, however, has a significant advantage over the ASX, which is in Australia, because the TSX is a Western-centric market. Its compliance rules and its standards are higher than the other exchange, and they are higher to the point whereby the US markets accept them at a certain point in time, which is phenomenal for a company as it graduates. But sticking to the TSX, so for companies such as Sigma, which are at that stage in corporate life where you need to raise increasing amount of capital, we needed to go outside of the borders of Canada for those orders from institutional investors. And what we learned in our fundraising was that every investor all over the world could easily place an order in the TSX, from the entire Middle East to East Asia, Singapore, Australia, Europe, the US, Brazil. I mean, we had investors from all over easily able to access the we call CDS system, the custody and transaction system of Canada through a broker, and easily place an eligible order that was electronically settled in the TSX. So it was a phenomenal experience, and without that, we wouldn't be able to amass such a sizable book of orders. And I will kind of tee up for Daniel here, because he was pretty instrumental in helping us put this together. So I think credibility and accessibility were key, and the TSX is the perfect platform. Gary, perhaps you want to say something also. Sorry, I'm putting the two of you on the spot.
Thanks, Anna. You're always so hard to follow. But hello, everyone. And I'll just add that, yeah, the world has become very small, and there are a bunch of markets, and it's very important strategically, with the help of investment bankers and private equity advising, to look at the entire suite of available markets and make the best decisions for the stage where you are. So the Brazilian market is outstanding for very, very large companies doing very large financings. The US and UK markets as well are very good for very, very many industries, and particularly, again, focusing on larger cap companies. The Canadian markets, as Anna said, are particularly knowledgeable about mining, are particularly used to doing financings for smaller to mid-cap companies, although they do larger cap financings like Nexa as well. And in particular, our markets, our stock exchanges, and our investment bankers are particularly knowledgeable and interested in Latin America, South America, much more than Australia would. The proximities, just the geographic awareness, and just the number of years that we have been working with projects and getting to know projects in Brazil, Argentina, Chile. So our markets are, I think, more welcoming than any other markets, particularly for smaller cap and mid cap companies, and we welcome companies with projects of merit even at the earlier stages, as long as they can get qualified technical report, and if it makes sense commercially for them to list. And I think you covered everything
That's
else
right.
I would have
That's
said.
exactly right, because the key point here is the companies such as Sigma are pre-operational, so we don't have revenues. So then what? How does one properly evaluate these projects, these companies, and differentiate valuation based on stage of execution? As I said earlier, track record of execution, timely execution, execution on budget. So when you look at the TSX regulatory framework, and I mean, I'm not circumventing this to Canadian investors, and this is a very important differentiator. An exchange doesn't mean investors. We had several Brazilian-based investors investing through their, international vehicles, properly, managed by XP. So let's just break the issue apart here. The exchange itself and the regulatory frameworks of the exchange are equipped through the National Instrument 43-101 to kind of give the company the proper seals as we deliver the project in stages. And that framework became a global reference, even by US investors, which is the most interesting thing. It is the most rigid framework, is the strictest, is the one that requires independent mineral auditor along the way. And the company in pre-operational stage gets differentiated and rewarded accordingly as per deliveries under that NI 43-101 framework, which is a big plus. So throughout your corporate life, when you start raising, we started raising $3 million. Remember, Gary and Fred were there. And then we're now moving into the $42 million. We could have raised 400, right? We didn't have user proceeds for 400, but that was the size of the book. But think about that wide range. It all happened within the TSX. As we graduate, we would think further, Bovespa, the US, where do you go next? Perhaps stay in Canada. But for this initial to early middle stage, we think there's an incredible advantage of being listed in the TSX.
Yeah, Anna, it's a very good point. of course, Sigma, it's a very interesting case. And of course, Ana Cabral has a very interesting and huge track record in the financial market. And I'd like to know how XP, for example, can help initial a junior company or a early stage company to think strategically as Ana Cabral did have been done.
They helped us, so.
And so, please, Daniel or Saraiva.
Let me start here, and then I will ask Vitor also to help me here. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for Sescom, and it's an honor to participate here. It's an honor to be with Ana here. Sigma is an exceptional case. We love them, and she's very. I mean, all the success that we had in this private placement was due to the team and to the thesis. So congratulations again, and thank you again for mentioning us. I think that when we look into Brazil, I mean, we had a very special case here recently, which was Aura. I mean, probably many of you follow this case. I mean, Aura was a listed company in TSX. I mean, they've been there for a long time. They were with some issues of liquidity in terms of the market, recognizing all the turnaround that was done there, and they were planning for a re-IPO. And then when considering to do this re-IPO, they checked with the main alternatives. I mean, they were looking to TSX, they were looking to New York, they were looking even to London. And the fact that one of us just tried to say, why don't you try Brazil? I mean, Brazil is in a very special moment in terms of the capital market development. We are just in the beginning of a huge change that's going on in Brazil. I mean, all the savings were basically allocated almost fully in plain vanilla fixed income instruments. And this money is just starting to move to all kind of new class of assets, mainly equities. So there is a structural flow of funds for equities in Brazil, and there is not enough companies and theses to support all this movement. So why not? I mean, Brazil is looking for different cases, for different theses, for diversification. And you should go there and have like a non-deal roadshow. Let's talk to some guys there and see if there is some demand. And then it was a huge success. I mean, since the beginning, it was very attractive in terms of investor appetite. So by doing that, we recognized that there was this it's a very important opportunity, not just for mining. I mean, we're talking about mining, but I mean, for all companies in the world, you should look to Brazil and see if there is a huge structural movement going there, and maybe it could be a very interesting alternative to consider to access this market. The issue of making, the challenge, and we love that in XP, the challenge was to educate the guys here about mining, not just mining, but gold mining. I mean, it was something very, very particular. And although people were very interested, people would need to start from the zero. The buy side was not used to this kind of analysis. And this was our challenging, and we were quite successful in bringing this knowledge about how to look into a mining gold company. And the deal was, even in a very tough moment during the pandemic, it was a very successful deal. And then we also act as the sole book runner of the follow-on in a couple of months after the IPO. So the thing that we see is that, first, there is a structural, very strong moment for equities in Brazil, not just for equities, but for alternative investments as a whole, which could be an alternative of all kind of companies, but including mining. And we think that mining, it's in a very special moment for that. And the second thing is that we have, the previous panel, and we were talking here, Brazil has a huge potential in terms of mining. We are just starting to see some of the players that are located here and could consider all the alternatives to raise capital and search for alternatives in M&A and also in raising capital. And we have a quite limited share of mining in our stock exchange and our capital market as a whole. I mean, if you look for that capital market, for example, there is almost none participation of mining. And in our stock exchange, mainly we have Vale, which is it's a huge chunk of the stock exchange, but it's in terms of different theses. And then when we're talking about mining here, but you are the specialist, you know here, it's every kind of mineral. It's a different animal. We need to look at these guys in a very particular way. And Brazil has a huge potential in many of those minerals. So we do believe that we should see a big number of companies in mining participating in our debt capital market. So this is the reason why we created a division, which is the natural resources. We look at oil and gas and mining, and we truly believe that this will be one of the sectors that will be going to the market strongly in the coming years. And this was very successful for Aura. Sigma, we also had the opportunity to work with them. We're always talking about some ideas, and we do believe that this is a kind of the case that also should the market, the Brazilian stock, the capital markets will be very helpful, to be very happy to look at that. And also several other cases that could consider to raise money. I would say take a look to Brazil, take a look what we're doing here, and we can bring some very interesting ideas for you guys.
Daniel, many thanks. I know that you have a successful case of Aura to share with us, but as you mentioned, something that caught my attention, that the need for the investor education. I just would like to ask Gary, who has a broad experience concerning Canadian regulations, a company that wants to access the Canadian market today, what this company need to do? What are the main requirements, especially to the smaller transactions that Anna had mentioned? That's something that is really important to smaller companies to access the market. Sometimes they do not have yet the volume to access, for example, in Brazil, the Brazilian Stock Exchange, Novo Mercado Corporate Governance corporate segment. So Gary, if you could assist us in that.
Thanks. Yeah, so our capital markets are quite flexible, and just giving a bit of an overview about it, we have choices in terms of which exchanges and how you go public. So I'm going to talk a little bit about them just for a couple of minutes, so you have just a very high level understanding of it. And then obviously the key is then to get the right financial advisors, the right investment bankers, the right stakeholders, and I would say the right lawyers, I think also, to do an analysis of what works best. And what I can also say as an overview is, in my work in Brazil, and in particular working with Fred Marquez, we have found that we can almost always, working with Brazilian counsel, with Brazilian lawyers, find a way to structure going public events which are tax efficient as well, so that there won't usually be any tax, tax events or tax payable by the founders of the mining company until they're ready to actually sell into the market. So merely going public usually won't trigger any bad tax results. So we have 4 exchanges in Canada. There is the Toronto Stock Exchange and the TSX Venture Exchange, which Anna was referring to. We have 2 newer exchanges as well. One is called NEO and the other is called the Canadian Stock Exchange. But right now, the main exchanges for mining companies are the Toronto Stock Exchange and the TSX Venture Exchange. The Toronto Stock Exchange is the more senior exchange, and the more venture capital exchange is the TSX Venture Exchange. It's actually the TSX Venture Exchange where Sigma is public now, and it is actually the easiest one to get listed on. But what I would say is that the two ways that a company would normally go public is either to do an initial public offering, which everybody's familiar with, or in the alternative, you could go public by way of a merger, the way that Sigma did. And so the Toronto Stock Exchange has a program called the SPAC program, which is fairly well known. They have it also in New York. And then the TSX Venture Exchange has a smaller capital version of that called the Capital Pool Company structure, which is actually what Sigma used. And what these two products do is they have clean, newly incorporated companies that have raised money, but they've not engaged in any, they've not carried on any business. They have no liabilities. They are perfectly clean. And what then a mining company in Brazil can do is it can merge with one of these public companies that does not have a business. And when you put the two together, what you have is a public company with enough shareholders so that it qualifies to be a public company, and they generally have money. And you combine that with the Brazilian mining company, which provides the operating assets. And so when you close that merger, you now have a company that has an operating business and meets all the criteria for listing in the Canadian capital markets. And so the Capital Pool Company one is for smaller mergers. The TSX the TSX SPAC program is for larger mergers. And basically what is required in either case is that you have gotten to the point where, as you've previously mentioned, there is a National Instrument 43101 technical report that is there, which speaks about the project. And it's important to note that it does not have to be a producing project. It can be an early stage project. So our National Instrument 43101 has the flexibility to be able to prepare a technical report for any stage of a project. So it does not have to be an advanced project necessarily. And the other main thing that is required is audited financial statements in accordance with International Financial Reporting Standards, IFRS, which conveniently is the same standard that you would use in Brazil. So the same financial statements generally that would be prepared for a Brazilian company would be the financial statements that we would be looking for here as well. And in the case of Sigma, what I would also say, it's a very good example, and as Anna mentioned, typically speaking, a company that's going to do a merger with a SPAC or a CPC, you would expect usually to also do a financing at the time that you do that merger. Sigma actually did one very early stage round financing and another one at the time of its merger. And Anna briefly mentioned, but the first was done at a lower valuation, but then when we went to do the merger, the value was multiples, much higher, and so it entered the public markets with a much higher valuation. So the technical report is most important, financial statements, good management, and a property of merit at any stage where you have a technical report. And if you have those things, then we can certainly qualify to join our capital markets.
Oh, Gary, thank you for this wonderful overview. And what caught my attention here about the requirements, and I think, Vito, if you can help us here, how was XP was the lead underwriter of the, as Danielle mentioned, of the Aura Minerals listing here in Brazil, and it's a company listed in Canada. So how was the process, and what are these corporate governance requirements that Gary mentioned in Canada, and that it was able to make this successful listing here or expedite it?
Sure. Thanks, Julia. And first of all, thanks, Sescom, for the invitation. We are together in several of these offerings in Brazil, so it's a pleasure to be here. So a few things on Aura. I want to say, I think from governance perspective, was not that difficult because you had the company already listed in Canada, so with a strong corporate governance standards. So they, different from other companies, they didn't have to do much of the adjustments in terms of council, in terms of board, in terms of internal controls or anything like that. But what we see here from a market perspective is a few interesting things when you see the demand for this type of asset. So a few highlights on Aura that is worth mentioning. So was the first IPO in Brazil post-COVID, was the first IPO of a mining company in 15 years, was the first IPO of a gold mining company in Brazil in history, right? And our first IPO under 476 rules BDR in Brazil. So it was like record after record, I mean, and because the investors are seeing the possibility for consolidation and growth, right? And what we, Rodrigo, the CEO of Aura, would like to say is that different from gold itself, a mining company, it pays dividends, it has operational leverage, and it grows, right? So different from the commodity itself. And the demand was so high. So when you see that after a few months, we did a follow-on, right? Because we had demand from investors, and the follow-on was bought 100% by local investors. So when you see Brazil buy side is learning about the sector, I think Daniel mentioned they are looking for diversification, and we are seeing strong demand for that. And another transaction that shows that in another scale was the IPO of CSN Mineração as well, right? It was the largest IPO in Brazil this year, 5 billion reais. And was the latest, was priced 12 of February, so 1 month ago exactly. And what we do see behind that, right? When you do see equity capital markets in Brazil, you see like in 2 months, right? 2 completed months, we had 23 deals raising more than 40 billion reais. So I was the first 2 months the strongest in Brazilian history for equity capital markets. And what we see here is more than 100 transactions for this year and about 200 billion reais in proceeds, which is more than doubling what was last year, which was approximately 50 transactions with 120 billion reais. And I think there's a few things behind that. And I think Ana mentioned a very interesting point on investors, Brazilian investors going outside Brazil. That's happening because local investors are getting huge here, independent asset managers. And the same thing is going in the other way, right? So global investors are looking each day more to the Brazilian stock exchange, because we are seeing an increase in liquidity, an increase in the number of assets. So take, for example, CSN Mineração had more than 200 investors looking to this transaction for 12 different countries. So just to give you some figures. So when you see the Brazilian stock exchange becoming each day truly a place for global investors as well, right? And then we are confident in another mining transactions here. We are seeing movements, mainly because when you look, despite the volatility based on fiscal question, all the topics on politics, but what do you see is interest rates structurally low for this year and probably next one. inflation, although everyone is saying inflation is going up high, is under control, right? And you see a huge outflow from fixed income and inflow in equities, right? So just last year, 50 billion reais just went out from fixed income, and more than 70 billion reais was in getting equities. And today we had was on Valor Econômico, right? The independent asset managers just raised more than 100 billion reais last year in Brazil. So this is huge. So we are hearing a huge inflow with structural space in Brazil to grow, and in a stock exchange that is still with poor diversification in Brazil, right? So you need to come with more assets. Investors are looking for it. Now there's all this question about turning on growth to value, right? And we are seeing this happening in all around the world. In Brazil is not different. So we are really excited about the perspectives of the mining sector in Brazil related to equity capital markets.
That's great. We have a boom in the capital markets now here in Brazil. And what we see here, prior to do the IPO, some of the companies, they make, they look for the private equity, such as or investments, or they make some mergers to have a better thesis to present to the investor, or after the equity offering, they have proceeds to buy other companies, especially in the mining sector, companies that have the permits to expand their production, for example. So in this regard, Marina has a wide experience in these M&As. So if you could provide us with your view concerning those M&As.
Yes, Julia, it's an honor to be here, especially to hear what Ana, Mauro, Daniel, and Gary have to say, especially from a business perspective. And what I can say is that as an M&A attorney, while I'm listening to them, I'm thinking, well, there's an M&A there, another one there. So Ana was talking about a pre-operational company raising capital. You can go public. You can have a private equity fund coming in. So there's one M&A there. Then this private equity fund has to leave, has to have an exit. It could be through an IPO, or it could be through a sale, another M&A. And then when you have companies raising capital, you also have M&A. M&A is expected as a way of growing and in the consolidation of the many industries that we see. And especially when we are talking here about investors from Canada and from all over the world investing in Brazilian companies, and even investors that were used to invest in fixed rate and now are moving to the stock markets and are moving to invest in companies. I think this group of investors could wonder, how is the M&A practice in Brazil? How consolidated it is? And what I can say is that from a legal perspective, we have a very well developed and consolidated M&A practice. As you know, we are a civil law country, but in this matter, we have adopted all the standards and all the models that were developed many decades before by the US and UK and Europe companies. So we are very used to having agreements, long agreements with reps and warranties, indemnity. All those things are standardized in Brazil as well. We know that in Brazil, we have especially timing challenges when it comes to Brazilian courts. So M&A's agreements, they as a rule, they have arbitration to solve conflicts. We have the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce arbitration chamber, which is probably the most well-regarded in Brazil. It's used in many transactions. And we have a lot of flexibility in this sense. We can have an agreement of an M&A of a Brazilian company, with arbitration in any location of the world. We can do it in English. We can choose arbitrators from Brazil and from other countries. So this gives a lot of credibility to M&A transactions in Brazil. We also have an antitrust law that it's almost 30 years old. So our antitrust regulators know very well the different industries, especially the mining industry, where you have a whole geographical concern when it comes to competition. It's not an industry that you can easily see presence in the market. You have to see geography, where the mine is crucial. And we already have a good track on those transactions. So I believe we are very well prepared in this sense. And not to mention due diligence. We know that Brazil is seen as a bureaucratic country, but this is also helpful. In a due diligence in Brazil, you can go to courts and you can verify all the lawsuits and legal proceedings of a company. In the mining sector, you can go to the regulator and verify all the licenses and everything. So you can have a very broad and reliable due diligence process. So I think that's where we stand from a legal perspective in M&A in Brazil.
So especially the M&As and the private equity. The private equity, when they enter, they especially assist the companies to enhance their corporate governance, something that we have discussed here that is really important for those companies to access the capital markets. But we have a hot topic nowadays that is ESG.
Yes.
So I'd like to ask here, Ana, and also whoever can bring some contribution, also Daniel and Vitor, in connection to this matter. Ana, in connection to the recent transaction Sigma has made, what do you think was the perception of the investors towards the ESG practice of Sigma, and how do you believe that these practices has added value for your transaction and to gather not only more investors, but especially a better valuation?
Well, it was fundamental. Essentially, in this transaction, I would say it was the one occasion when we were fortunate enough to finally have an alignment of investment capital with the operating purposes of the company. And that alignment has translated into the reward we received in an oversubscribed book, an upsized transaction, pricing above the range. In what sense? I mean, Sigma, since its inception, I mean, the capital I manage it's part of a responsible investment a philosophy at A10, right? And since 2015, our mission when investing in Sigma was to do it differently. Remember, in 2015, it was the aftermath of the Mariana/Samarco dam situation, right? So it was incredibly difficult for a mining company to find venture capital. It was practically impossible, especially in Brazil. So we set out to fund that company with the sole purpose of trying to reinvent the sector. In other words, as we were getting to, let's say, the hot spot of the problem environmentally, and then later on, from a carbon issue, the mining sector has been targeted also as a big villain. Our mission was to, get to the heart of the issue of responsible investing at the time. So over the following 6 years, since 2015, we've developed an ESG-centric way of building this business. And when you look at what we've built in terms of an inventory of carbon credits, in terms of a plan for the development of the project, a lot of these decisions have been made a long time ago. And a lot of these credits and differentiators have been built over time, right? So unfortunately, the investment community, up until that point, has not really ascertained the premium to us in any regard. We started to be able to quantify the benefits of having developed this company on an ESG-centric way when we secured project finance. We were able to secure a project finance at a significantly lower rate than our peers. 10% less, like 1,000 basis points less. And that started to quantify what we call, the strategic advantages of having a project develop in an ESG-centric way. And I'm bringing the history up because that one thing led to the next. Our capital raising in July was built up for the equity funding of the project finance on the back of that project finance having been obtained at such favorable rates. And then the fundraising we did now to develop phase 2 of the project, basically, and to complement with the reserve, with the project management reserve, the equity funding of the project with a cushion reserve, were again built on that ability to quantify ESG. But what has changed? The investor community was full on trying to understand companies that could demonstrably and quantifiably show that they had built their project in an ESG centric manner. And we had that ability, essentially.
It's great, Anna. And it's amazing how all of these subjects, ESG, private equity, public equity, IPO, M&A, they all come together. It was very, very interesting, the perspective of all you panelists. And I'd like to invite Fred Marx, who is our representative in Toronto, to address some questions, and of course to have his closing remarks, and thanking all of you for the opportunity to discuss those interesting subjects, and thank again BCC and Carol for giving us this opportunity. Fred, it's up to you.
Obrigado, Sarah. Thank you. Well, I can't, as an executive director of the Brazil-Canada Chamber of Commerce and the co-head of the mining group, I couldn't be happier with the results of the two panels, and I didn't expect anything less with the level of the speakers and panelists that we were able to put together here today. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts here with us. I know that we are very close to the end, and Carolina, my boss at the BCCC, she asked us to be very conscious about the time here. So I just want to make a couple of points as closing remarks. First, I need to congratulate the A&M and Yoshihiro for all the efforts, and more importantly, for all the accomplishment of the A&M during the past couple of years. It's truly amazing. Us that we've been working with before with the NPM and now with the A&M, we see improvements on every single area. So congratulate. This is amazing news for the sector. The way that the agency is spearhead everything and is trying to bring more clarity on the regulatory environment and security for investors, this will only contribute to an even stronger Brazilian mining industry. And I think I couldn't expect better news from Yoshihiro about the two main upcoming resolutions, the collateral resolution, which will bring investors a lot of comfort in continuing and increasing the amount of investment into the Brazilian mining industry, but also the resource and reserves resolution that will allow us to speak the same language as in the globe they are speaking. So and with that, like we can link to the second panel, because we saw during the panel the importance of technical disclosure, the importance of governance, the importance of ESG. And you can only accomplish that when you are truly looking and practicing best standards in the mining industry. And technical disclosure, it is an area that you need to level from the top. It needs to be the highest disclosure possible. It needs to be the stronger technical work done by the company. So this is an area that I think this new resolution will add a lot of value to the Brazilian industry. But I think we need, the ANM need now to bring the CVM and the B3 to the debate, so we can harmonize this concept within the regulatory capital markets framework as well. As I said on my first comment, when you look at the three main transactions, Brazil related, we get maybe four main transactions, right? Like we have the Aura BDRs, we have the CSN IPO, we have Sigma and Nexa were the two other icon transactions that in the last couple of years really show the potential of the Brazilian mining industry. And when you look at the technical disclosure of those transactions, for example, our BDRs follow the NI 43101 in Canada, so as Sigma. CSN use the JORC, and Nexa use the 43101 as well, because they're listed here in Toronto. Here in Canada, you can use the JORC as well. But what they do is they do a conciliation between the JORC and the NI 43101, which is a very simple conciliation. It doesn't add much work or cost for the companies, but harmonize how the public traded companies are disclosing their technical information. So I think this will be a next step for Brazil, a next step in improving the technical disclosure. And I encourage the industry in Brazil, and I'll be available, and I'm sure that Gary Litwak will also be available to further discuss how we do here in Canada and how can Brazil improve it even more the technical disclosure within the capital markets, because this will help us to build a strong capital markets for the mineral exploration and mining industry in Brazil. So this is one suggestion and contribution here that I would like that it comes out from the discussions that we had today. The second thing is, when we're talking about security regulation, there are also other important areas that Brazil also needs to evolve. And we see the engagement with the security regulator in Brazil, and I would like to congratulate them for all the efforts in making it happen. For example, Aura BDRs, like there was a lot of regulatory challenges there as well that had to be overcome. And there is still work that needs to be done and can be done very easily. For example, why not facilitate dual listings of companies listed on Toronto Stock Exchange and the Toronto Stock Exchange Venture, for example? There are some discussions going on right now about the possibility of companies, for example, like Sigma to do BDRs. Sigma is a Canadian listed company on the TSX with assets in Brazil, with international investors like BlackRock. Like, it's a company that has a truly tremendous investors base in a beautiful project in Brazil that is putting Brazil on the battery metals map. So how a security regulation in Brazil cannot address that type of company, cannot facilitate that type of company or getting listed in Brazil, either through a BDR or let's maybe think outside the box here and create some other alternatives. So I think this is an important debate that needs to happen in Brazil. And maybe as a suggestion to finalize our panel here would be a second event, a follow-up event, so we can talk a little bit more about those important securities, regulatory improvements that can be done in Brazil. On that tone, I think we are on the right path. I think that a lot of was done in the past couple of years in Brazil in increasing the regulatory framework and increasing the foreign investment environment in Brazil to attract more capital. But I also want to see us improving the capital market in Brazil and consolidating the good work that has been done on the past couple of years with the participation of important players in Brazil like XP and BNDES and everyone else that is here on this panel. So thank you again for your participation. We will touch base with you for a follow-up event if you agree. And I think we are right on time. Carol, you're going to be very happy with me.
Fred, just to end it here, we need not only a second, but a third, fourth event, because this is a really important matter. So I would like, again, to thank you all for your time. I think what Fred has mentioned, that we need to work towards a better synergy between the markets. And we have here, what would we could have more than the experiences shared by the trailblazers here that are the pioneers, and XP and Ana Cabral and Gary with his broad knowledge of the Canadian market regulations. So we do not have time here for questions. So Carolina is going to make available an email in the chat. So please send questions or anything you want to discuss, and we are going to be available to address. And if you want to direct the question to a person in particular, just specify in the email, okay? And Mauro and Marina, many thanks also to you and to all who have joined us here in the panel.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Marcelo, all the Sescom team for the partnership and for the help in putting this event together. Thank you all the speakers for your availability and for sharing your knowledge and your insights with us. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. Thank you, Sescom, for the partnership. And I see you all very shortly. Count on us for that follow-up discussion. We're happy to host again and continue promoting all those changes that are happening in the Brazilian mining sector. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.